Hi, friends. How are you? This is our last week of school. I'm sad, but that's okay. We're going to keep on going, right? So this week, I'm going to show you what are vocabulary words, all right? So come with me. Our first word is task, and a task is a small job to do. Task can be anything, a task at school, like schoolwork, or maybe mom says you have a couple of tasks before you get the Wi-Fi password. And in Spanish, you can either say la tarea or deber. Obviously, if it's more than one, it would be deberes or tareas. Our next word is glimmering, and it means shining and sparkling. There's not really a word in Spanish that truly translates to glimmering, and it depends on how you use it. So this one has a lot of different um, words that can be used for that word. So I chose to use brillante because that's kind of like shining and sparkling. Luminoso is another one, so it's like it illuminates. Our next word is served, and that's carried in and placed before you, right? It's before people, like when you go to a restaurant or if your parents are serving you dinner or breakfast or lunch. And that's a cognate that is servir. The next one is content. Now, this is a word that can be used two different ways. You can say content. So, the content I am teaching you today is part of our reading curriculum. So, if you ever see this word in a story you're reading, you really have to read the sentence completely to know which one it means. We're using it as content, meaning satisfied. And in Spanish, this is also a cognate and it's contento. Our next word, it's kind of hard to see, but it's worn, and it's having the look of being used over and over again, like a worn pair of shoes. I know Mrs. G likes a worn pair of Converse. That means I've worn them like for a couple years and they're nice and soft and just very, very comfortable, right? In Spanish, this is gastado. It's talking about, that you've used it so many times. Our next word is overjoyed, and that means very happy. And this kind of comes from contento. So when you say overjoyed, it's contensísimo, like you're really, really happy. So again, there's not a real word to it. We kind of reuse the content word. Concealed is hidden or out of sight. Concealed again, like if you're hiding something, could be like oculto. And I'm thinking of like cops have concealed weapons, right? So that's their oculto. But it's also secreto, like secret. The next one is valuable, and it's worth a lot of money, right? And in Spanish, that's valioso. All right. So our first story this week is Cinderella Stories. And the first story that I usually read with you doesn't have pictures, so um, good readers have to listen to fluent reading, right? You're listening to the way I read the story, how I stop at my periods, how I stop to think about what's going on in the story. So let's see what happens in Cinderella Stories. Says, did you know that Cinderella you often see in movies is not the only one? It's amazing. There are over 700 Cinderella stories. Wow. Each story is a little different from the others. The earliest versions were told more than 2,000 years ago. Today, you can find Cinderella stories in books, movies, and on TV, and musicals too, right? So, what is the main topic of this selection? If I asked you, what was that first paragraph about? What would you tell me? Yeah, that there's so many different versions of Cinderella stories. That's perfect. All right. Each version of the Cinderella story has details that make sense for the time and place the story was first told. For example, Charles Perrault is the author of the Cinderella story most of us know today. He wrote his Cinderella story to suit people living in France during the 1600s. It is full of many things we do not find in our world today. For example, it has coaches pulled by teams of horses, grand balls, princes and princesses. Although Mrs. Island would tell you she's a princess, right? In some modern versions of the story, the sisters might be heading for a prom instead of a ball. The main character might be a boy who has to mow the lawn instead of a girl who has to sweep out the fireplace. Authors can make all kinds of changes from the traditional story and still share the same themes and ideas. There are versions of the Cinderella story from all over the world. Maybe there are so many because each story held special meaning for the people living in that place. As a result, the differences between the stories show that what was important to the tellers and the listeners at that time. Maybe some listeners were worried about getting enough food or money, while others cared more about beauty. Let's compare Charles's Cinderella to another story, Little One Eye, Little Two Eyes, Little Three Eyes. That's the whole title of the one that we're going to compare it to. In Cinderella, her father remarries an unkind woman with two unkind daughters. They are mean to Cinderella. They give her task after task to do, so her work is never done. Her clothes are so worn they look like rags. In Little One Eye, a mother has three daughters. The first has one eye, the second has two eyes, and the third has three eyes. Little Two Eyes sisters are mean to her because she looks like everyone else. Cinderella is not content to stay at home while her stepsisters go to a ball. A fairy godmother appears, she changes a pumpkin into a coach, and Cinderella's rags into a beautiful gown, complete with a pair of glimmering glass slippers. Two Eyes cries for food. A woman tells her to wish on her goat. When she does, a feast is served. Cinderella leaves one glass slipper at the ball by mistake. The prince tries to find the owner of the slipper. He finds Cinderella when she fits one slipper on her foot and takes the other out from where she has concealed it. The prince is overjoyed to find her. Little Two Eyes ends up with a silver tree. Only she can pick the valuable fruit. The prince marries Cinderella. She forgives her stepsisters. In the other story, a prince marries Little Two Eyes. She forgives her sisters too. People are still making up new Cinderella stories today. Maybe you'll be the next person to write one. So, what is the same and what is the different about Cinderella and Little One Eye, Little Two Eyes, Little Three Eyes? Think about it. Both have a main character that is sad. Yep. What else? Because their sisters are mean. Yep. One is stepsisters, one are real sisters. Yep. Cinderella gets to go to a ball. Mm-hmm. And Little Two Eyes gets a feast. Good job. Thank you for listening. So what lesson can be learned from Cinderella, Little One Eye, Little Two Eyes, and Little Three Eyes, as well as other Cinderella stories? Yeah, right? The story started sad, but then they helped the others see how unkind they were, right? So at the end of the story, everybody ended up being happy, and there was also forgiveness, which is something really big and hard to do. All right, I hope you liked that story. Come back on Thursday for my last story with you. All right, have a great day, my friends. Bye bye.